Hello, everyone. This is Cole from the American Journal of Healthcare Strategy, and we have a very special guest today, Christine. Please go ahead and introduce yourself for us.
Hi, Christine, calling in from Boulder, Colorado. I have spent the last decade equipping myself with the skill set needed to design and build care models that are using emerging technology. I'm master prepared in health administration, and I'm excited to talk more about my career journey with you.
So, can you just take us back to start with? What was the beginning of your career like? What was your undergraduate and graduate pathways? Why did you choose those? And how did you transition to where you are now?
Sure. It's certainly non traditional. I went to school at Clemson University in South Carolina and I started studying biology. I was very interested in becoming a doctor. That was my initial game plan. However, the first couple of tests in chemistry and biology indicated that that might not be the best path. And so I actually transitioned into public health, and I was excited because that meant that I could influence patients on a larger scale at like a population level. And so I studied public health. And when I was in my freshman year, I went around to my professor's doors and knocked around and was like, is there any opportunities for me to do research with you in any capacity? I just want to do some type of research. And I ended up getting brought under by one of my professors who was exploring biofeedback monitoring in Alzheimer's patients and family caregivers. It was a very lucky unfolding of events where I got to partner with her for 3.5 years of my undergrad to lead research, including developing the IRB, the protocol, the interventions, and then actually collecting and analyzing data using one of the first wearables in the market. And so we were really operating in outpatient and hospital settings. And that's where I started to get exposed to administration, to hospital settings in general. And I did a few other internships throughout my undergraduate studies in the health systems. One was at Greenville Health System in clinical trials management, and the other was at MedStar Health in quality and patient safety in DC. And yeah, so that's kind of where I got started. And after college, I was looking at getting into consulting right away, but I didn't have a tremendous amount of experience. And so I thought it would be best to go and get potentially another degree to be able to make myself a stronger applicant. I was exploring programs and I ended up talking to a lot of hospital administrators at that time. And they encouraged me to look at VCU and look at the Masters of Health Administration track. And so I did. And I ended up at VCU and spent 2 years in the classroom and 1 year as an administrative fellow. And I worked a number of internships there as well. Some of them were in patient quality and safety, some were in patient experience. Largely, I was getting experience in operations and managing a hospital, and typically sat alongside the executive teams and really observed them making decisions and supported where I could.
How impactful was that fellowship for what you ended up doing next?
So the experience that I got understanding a hospital leadership is very crucial to what happens next in my journey. And I guess what I learned during my MHA was that I was gravitating towards startup events in the community. I was grabbing pizza with founders and kind of picking their brains around how they were starting companies, and I just was very interested in innovation and technology, and that wasn't getting like tickled in hospital administration. And I think the closest I got was during like capital requisition processes where I was looking at like who we were investing in. But in terms of actually developing the solutions or bringing in innovation, I was really craving that. And I wasn't really getting that opportunity in the hospital walls.
Right.
So after my fellowship, I moved to Boston. I knew Boston had a lot going on, and I got the opportunity to join Phillips, which was running global accelerators for startups. And they had different focal points for their startup programs. The first one was actually AI. And so that's where I really got excited about AI and product development, co-creation models, business model innovation, and really where I started to understand how this knowledge that I had from the hospital realm could actually support with maybe the development of products and also the business model for some of these emerging startups in health tech.
Now, did you have direct reports when you at that time when you got there?
No, so we were a team of there was 10 or 11 innovation leads, and these were folks that had expertise in like design research, business modeling, and really technology validation for the internal arm. And so then we also had supportive roles. My role was very supportive in nature, where I was helping with the marketing and operations of the accelerator program. And so that looked like creating a database or a CRM of folks that might want to have a conversation with these startups to validate their solution. And so we had pitch nights, investor networking nights, and flew these startups to hospital systems, had them engage with hospital executives. Really, the goal was to figure out how to de risk these solutions for Phillips to potentially work with them or partner with them in some way.
How does that all fit in? Did you enjoy your time working in at Phillips? What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was an interesting transition because you're coming out of this very like glorified internship where you're a fellow and you're working day in, day out with the CEO. And then when you step outside of that, you you kind of take back on that individual contributor hat. And so it can be a bit of a shift, like a mindset shift to, okay, I'm not playing in the big leagues anymore. I've got to cut my teeth and prove my worth here. And so in terms of moving outside of the hospital walls, I'd say it's very important to have champions at wherever you're going um, to work, and having people that can advocate for you to get back up to where you're comfortable playing in the most efficient manner. And so I would say that a lot of this was exploratory for me, and I took on a couple of different roles because I knew I didn't want to play hospital administrator, but I wasn't exactly sure what was next. So it was either going to be some sort of like public health angle, like research, maybe design. I was very interested in product development. I was also just have a general knack for marketing and building, and so I viewed a lot of these almost kind of like back to that undergrad experience where I had done this like independent research study to really like figure out what I wanted to do. I viewed each of these roles as independent research, and the research or the problem statement was like, what should Christine's career be? and
That's
and
great. I
so,
love
these trials for me were typically like a year. And so with regards to the operation and marketing at Phillips, I recognized that rather than playing a supportive role kind of on the sidelines supporting the action, that I actually wanted to be the innovation lead. I wanted to be the person that was advising the startups and bringing it through ideation workshops and um, interfacing with the investors. I didn't know how I was going to make the leap from hospital administration to like investor. And so I thought that product would be the next natural stepping stone for me. And that's what took me to CVS.
in your skills based on the LinkedIn, right? What you were involved with at CVS seems to be quite a bit different than what you were involved with at Phillips, right? So can you tell me, was that scary at all? Was that a huge learning curve? What was that like? And also, how did you get that position? Because that seems like a fairly prestigious position for someone who's a year or so out of their MHA program.
So I guess I skipped a bit. So in between, during graduate school and before Phillips, I had done a number of startup engagements. And I supported folks in the community that didn't have a sense of like documenting research protocols or communicating their vision, say through a pitch deck. And so I did a lot of work with one of the guys I worked with developed a music intervention app for children with autism, and he was looking to scale that across Virginia. And so I supported him for a semester in developing research protocols and then a pitch deck to go support, secure like approval and funding with the Phase-In School, which was a alternative learning school that had multiple sites across Virginia. I think those experiences and being able to speak to those experiences of kind of like self drive, curiosity, interest in improving public health, really. It was that foundation that I got at Clemson that really supported me with executing in this role. The role was really focused on social determinants of health and how to improve access for the disenfranchised. And so a lot of our interventions were around digital modalities or interventions that, this experience that I got in graduate school and a few other internships or independent studies kind of built on allowed me to be a strong candidate for that role.
Yep. So that makes a lot of sense. So you sought out these experiences early on of things that you were just genuinely interested in from the sounds of it. It didn't seem like you had like a master plan, right? You were just really doing things that you felt had impact that you wanted to do. And it seems like you looked for things that had the most impact. It seems like that's why and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's why you went with the startup space, is because you wanted to innovate. You wanted to create a big impact.
Yes, I early in my career wanted to develop skills that would position me to be in a place where I could design and build like the future of healthcare. And so I always gravitated towards what was going to be like the thing in like 2 to 3 years. And I tried to get in early and get experience hands on building those products. And so, like at CVS, they were talking a lot about like omni channel. And that's kind of like, haptic experiences, which we all crave, this human element, but also having this data driven digital interface. And so a lot of what I've gravitated towards has been, how do we position ourselves to age gracefully in our homes using technology? Like, that has been the North Star throughout all of these experiences.
Mm. And how did that cause you to transition from CVS to, is it pronounced Linus?
Linus, yes.
Linus?
So COVID hit, right?
Yep.
And I was driving to Rhode Island every day, um, and and that was beginning to take a toll. And so, for my own like lifestyle, when COVID hit, I had a lot of opportunities to get introspective and think about where I was going, not only in my career but personally and in my lifestyle. Boston is incredible for industry connections. I would say that it did not cater to a healthy lifestyle for me personally. And so when I had the opportunity to move to Boulder, I was like, yes, that I can see myself cycling and skiing and going to yoga and really taking care of myself. Kind of back to that whole work life balance aspect. I had been go, go, go for so many years, through graduate school and then through all of these competitive environments, that I needed to take a step back and take care of myself before I could continue in a way that was going to be sustainable.
And so, I assume you've liked Boulder, Colorado, because you've stayed there 4 or 5 years, right? Three or
Yes.
4 years, I think.
Yes.
Um, so, can you tell us about? I guess one of the things that really interests me personally. Maybe this is a selfish question. I don't want to derail things too much, but you went out freelance for over 2 years now, right?
Yes.
Um, I guess what I want to know is you didn't have the 20 years of experience I see a lot of people have who
Mm-hmm.
go out freelance, but it seems like you've been successful because you're still doing it.
Yes.
What was the motivation like? How did you manage this? I would love nothing more than to be freelance, freelance consultant. So, is it as good as you've hoped? Would you do it again? Would you do it earlier? Just tell me your thoughts on what that's been like.
Yeah, I think there's trade offs, and it's kind of like, what is your risk appetite would be my first question, because it is a high risk environment where some of your core clients, if they were to go away, then you may be in a difficult position. However, in terms of being able to craft your lifestyle and craft your workload and decide which problem areas you want to focus on or who you want to work with, all of these aspects make it worth it for me. If I decide everyone's going on a big ride up the mountain on Wednesday at lunch, and I want to go on that, I can structure my week in a way that allows me to go for that. And I think that at this juncture in my career, that makes sense. Um, for the long term, it's it's an interesting question of like, is this going to support the skill sets that I need to be developing and product to be able to continue to be advising folks at the forefront of innovation. But for the past 2 or 3 years, it's been a dream for me to be able to step out and to work with like 30 to 40 different startups on their problems, on supporting them with growth. And I've spent a lot of time in strategic planning, branding and positioning, digital transformation, market research, product ideation, and business model innovation.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to go into as well. Is based on the site here, you have a lot of different skills that you're offering to these
Mm-hmm.
startup organizations, but you've also really specifically, it seems like, focused on AI. That's been an area that you really are passionate about. Out of all the startups that you support, how many of them are involved in AI? If you had to give a percent, is it 100%? Is it?
No, it's not. I would say that the focal point for me, or where things kind of intersect, is like health, technology, care delivery. And
Mm.
like that's kind of the, and care delivery could be like a food and beverage solution that you get at the grocery store. Like it's not contained to what we traditionally think of in terms of like hospital operation arms, inpatient, outpatient. So, in terms of AI, I've worked on largely on a cardiac wearable dashboard for you'd know them, but it's proprietary. But you know, looking at kind of the revenue model behind patient care, and so looking at cardiac dashboards in that way. And then in terms of some of the other startups that I've worked for, it's been more on the personalized medicine front. So looking at actual like genomics or life sciences assays and solutions there, where maybe it's a diagnostic, and the diagnostic is actually using language learning models to improve um, its ability to match a sample to a database and generate meaningful output.
One of the things that you mentioned in the um, in the discussion with us is you sent us a slide, and it has kind of the healthcare AI market map on it. And that's really fascinating to me because you wrote, how many or how many co-pilots does one need, right? You're going to end up with 100 of these, and I've struggled with that myself, especially when you're talking about. I'm sure you've used them, a lot of these personally. You end up having 10 or 20 $20 a month subscriptions for all these different AI services, right? And
Yes.
yeah, and you end up with a real problem, not just because of the cost, but also it actually becomes more inefficient.
Mm.
So what are you doing in that situation? Where do you think we're going to go?
Yes, integration and interoperability is not a new challenge. It's something that we've been trying to tackle for decades. And so, you look at things like FHIR, like the new standards for standardized documentation. Like that's just the first step, and like that's been a huge bottleneck. Like we need to get the data structured in a way where you can then use it to train a model.
Mm.
Currently, that is not how things are structured, and there's part of that that's intentional, and so you have to look systemically, like how are we being incentivized to make these solutions work? Why are there silos in data structures? Are those something that is contributing to a bottom line, or like what is the narrative there? And a lot of the data structuring and processing, in my opinion, is where we're very weak right now. I
Mm.
think that's a huge issue for AI being successful today.
And how much of this is due to those cognitive distortions that you're talking about? And is that something that you help people to overcome as a consultant? Because reading through a lot of them, it seems like a lot of the issues we do face with data processing, with that interoperability, comes from a lot of these cognitive distortions that you're coming from, right?
So, when you're talking about cognitive distortion, so humans are lazy. We take mental shortcuts, and these are typically biased. And so, when you look at these and how they're impacting the system of healthcare, you can see it everywhere. I mean, the shiny object syndrome is like all of the venture capital right now is under that. And you can see like with all of the startup investments that are happening in like precision medicine, medical coding, clinical trials, neurostimulation devices, pharmacy, telemedicine. Like these are all great potential use cases. However, like a lot of these LLMs or language learning models, they're in their infancy, right? And so they haven't been tested at a systemic level for health outcomes. So a lot of it's still hearsay. You know, if you put AI on a napkin and you're at a coffee shop with an investor and you're like, this is my solution, and then you circle AI, like you're gonna get funding. And
Hmm.
that's just because, you know, there's this like you mentioned, this fear of missing out, you know, this desire to adopt the next new thing for fear of being left behind. There's also, yeah, the shiny object syndrome, which is like being drawn to new flashy technologies without considering their true value.
When we don't talk about AI, when we're going to investors, they want to see a slide deck, they want to see a pitch deck, they want to see our business plan, they want to understand the company. When we talk about AI, it's here's the money, send me the pitch deck when you get a minute. It's a very like different reaction. And I wonder how we're actually going to change from that. You know, where do you see us
Right.
going in 5 years? Because it does worry me that this is just going to be an ongoing, I mean, an issue that we're going to be facing for, 20 years or so.
It's kind of reminds me of telemedicine, right? It's like,
Mm.
is AI the new telemedicine? Like a lemon disguised as a Ferrari?
Mm-hmm.
Or will it change healthcare forever? And that's kind of the question that I think we'll be answering over the next 5 years. But right now, today, there are a few other biases coming up, which is action bias, which is preferring action over inaction, even when the benefits are unclear. Uninformed optimism, overestimating the benefits of AI in healthcare without solid evidence, and then
Yeah.
game theory, and that's coming up in the business modeling. So making decisions based on competition rather than on patient outcomes.
Yep.
And we tend to stick to past behaviors even if they're not working. And so a lot of these folks that are putting their stake in the ground for AI, like they're not going to backtrack on that. They're going to try and figure out how to make it work. And so you've seen Google coming in, Microsoft and Oracle. Like there's a lot of big heavy hitters coming into the clinical settings. And then what I've been most excited to see is that there's a new consortium of healthcare leaders that are creating like a trustworthy and responsible AI network. And they're, you know, a lot of the larger health systems or organizations have bought into this. But I think, you know, when you're looking at the next 5 years, there's a lot of pitfalls, you know, and there's a lot of things that I think are coming up as dilemmas that I would like to see overcome.
What's that consortium you're referring to?
Yeah, so it's called Train, TRAIN, Trustworthy and Responsible AI Network,
Mm.
making safe and fair AI accessible to every healthcare organization.
Is there technology out there that can
Mm-hmm.
actually make an AI actually safe?
Right now, that's unclear. And, you know, we're all aware of the bias that's at play right now, racial bias, gender bias. You know, there's general, like in healthcare, if you think about it, like a lack of consent for patients to even know if there's the AI being used in their treatment plan. There's like the liability. If something goes wrong, does the doctor get in trouble? Does the software developer get in trouble? There's like privacy and trust concerns. But I think what you brought up is my biggest concern is the general purpose base models that a lot of these AIs are being trained on. So I'll give you an example. There's this Rite Aid legal case where it was it was screening folks who came in for shoplifting
Yep.
using a general purpose AI and making some assumptions that were inaccurate. And so they looked at, okay, so why did this occur? You know, they go into the code and they see that this base model that it was trained on had gender and racial bias at play. So, because this is such a new area, when you're actually in the code as a software developer, you're using a lot of things to speed up your workflow that are already kind of in place. So, say you grab a general purpose base model and then you start using that to build whatever you're building. If that has a ton of bias in it, which it does right now, like that's going to be overfitting to everything that you train it on in regards to like a health system or a
Yep.
patient population. And so the way to combat that is to take the approach that a lot of these genomics AI folks have taken, which is to create repositories or open model networks. This is a huge challenge in healthcare, right? You can't have an open model of PHI,
Hmm.
and so then you can't interrogate one another. The whole, it's kind of like you put on your like your good hacker hat, and you go and you say, is this trustworthy or ethical? Because of the nature of healthcare, like you can't really lift up the hood and let
Right.
people look at the parts, look at the engine and say, and then when you think of like the business model too, it's like it's all like patented or
Yep.
siloed in ways where you can't get to the core of what it's doing. That is my biggest concern today.
I want to ask kind of a closing question on this is how can someone like myself or someone who's in hospital operations, how can they learn to kind of be like you? How can they learn these skills, learn about these things? I mean, I'm assuming not all of it came from the education you received at your MHA program or just from your experience. So are there, books we can read,
Yes,
communities we can get involved with?
absolutely. There are a lot of courses coming out right now that I can link after this to kind of direct folks to, but there's a lot of courses that can get you upskilled in just understanding kind of the lay of the land and the technology. If you want to start getting into these pitfalls and ethical dilemmas and really the ins and outs of patient rights or model training data or like updates, general updates, Substack is becoming one of my go to sources. There are AI experts on Substack who write specifically about healthcare. And I really appreciate when they give actual examples of, like a 2019 United Health AI algorithm prioritized care for healthier white patients over sicker Black patients, impacting over 100 million patients. Like there is evidence, there's a news article, and a link. And those stories for me, storytelling is always so crucial to my understanding. When I can see examples of these things playing out in actual, Cigna AI algorithm automatically denies claims. Cigna doctors concur without even looking. Like when I see a headline like that, I'm like, okay, what are we looking at there? And I want to know more. A lot of it for me is just curiosity and kind of following the rabbit trail, seeing what I find.
I think that's very good advice to just be have that sense of curiosity. It seems like that's something you've had throughout your career. You've had a real sense of wanting to learn and in curiosity in the decisions that you made on where to go to school, what to go to school for, what jobs to get. It seems like that's led to your success quite a bit.
Yes, and just to kind of tie the bow on AI, like I don't think AI is like all bad. I think that AI as a companion, a co-pilot, like a way to augment human versus like replace them. There's so much opportunity to improve productivity, decision making, and outcomes. And it can be like an additional observer, assistant, or an eye, like ensuring that important details are not overlooked. And this is very important in like image analyses or diagnostics or genomics. Um, So the proposition here is that like a system or a process would involve both AI and humans, but it would be human d- designed first. You know, it wouldn't be an AI led model ever,
Yeah.
would be my recommendation. Like, there will always be a human involved, and it'll be designed in a way that it isn't force fitting solutions based on what this technology is capable of, but rather you're stepping back and you're saying, okay, what are the unmet needs or jobs to be done or problem areas here? And then you go to your toolbox, and AI is just like Excel. It's one of the things you might pick up to solve for this problem, but it's not something that you're going in like, how can we use AI to get on this train that's like
Right.
everyone's moving on? Like, I would strongly discourage that approach.
Yep. And I'm a big fan of AI as well. I'm not. I think it can be very useful, and it can definitely speed things up as well. I would love to talk for a few more hours, but of course we have to stay within time. So hopefully you'll consider coming back on. I couldn't be more appreciative for having you on this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you. And just one last thing, because you mentioned hospital administrative students or early careerists maybe entertaining the thought of doing something about this, about these problems.
Absolutely.
And I think I'm seeing like this opportunity to become a patient experience designer, or someone that is being the glue between the tech and the human. And we call it human computer interaction and design. That's like the technical phrase for it. But I think someone that understands the operations and can wear the hospital admin hat, but then be designing these solutions with like a patient experience lens, and maybe upskill in some of the basics of UX UI and some of those like technology concepts. That is an emerging career path.